The sky above Seoul turned black at exactly 3:47 in the afternoon. Dr. Kim Tae-ho looked up from his coffee and watched as massive shapes blocked out the sun. The crystalline ships were beautiful in their own terrible way, like floating cathedrals, made of dark glass and twisted metal. They hung in the air without making a sound, casting shadows over the entire city. Tae-ho dropped his cup. It shattered on the laboratory floor as alarms began screaming throughout the Global Defense Initiative building. He had spent 15 years studying the possibility of alien contact, but he had never imagined it would look like this. The first broadcast came 30 minutes later. Every television, radio, and phone on Earth suddenly carried the same message. The voice was harsh and mechanical, like grinding metal trying to form human words. Humans of Earth. You will surrender. We are the Valthyr. We have taken 17 worlds before yours. You will serve us, or you will die. You have 1 day to decide. The message repeated in broken English, Chinese, Spanish, and a dozen other languages. Each version sounded worse than the last, as if the aliens had learned human speech from old recordings and computer programs. In the underground command center beneath Seoul, General Park Hyun-woo stared at the massive screens showing Valthyr ships over every major city. New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, Delhi, all of them covered by the dark shadows of alien vessels. How many ships? He asked. Over 3,000 worldwide, replied Lieutenant Nam Soo-jin, her fingers flying over her keyboard. They appeared simultaneously at 15:47 local time in each time zone. This was planned down to the second. Tae-ho arrived at the command center just as the first human response began. Fighter jets from 6 different countries launched coordinated attacks on the ships hovering over their capitals. The pilots were brave. They were also completely outmatched. The alien shields shimmered like soap bubbles when the missiles hit them. The explosions looked tiny against the massive hulls. Then the Valthyr ships responded. Beams of purple light swept across. The sky and the human aircraft simply vanished. Not destroyed, not shot down. They were there one moment and gone the next as if they had never existed. My God, whispered General Park. What kind of weapons are those? The answer came 6 hours later when the Valthyr began their ground assault. The ships descended slowly, landing in open areas outside major population centers. Huge ramps opened in their sides and the invaders emerged. They looked almost human at first glance, but wrong in ways that made people's eyes water. Too tall, too thin, with joints that bent in directions that human joints should not bend. Their skin was pale gray and seemed to shift and crawl when you looked directly at it. They wore armor that appeared to be alive, pulsing with veins of purple light. The worst part was their faces. They had human features but stretched and distorted like reflections in a funhouse mirror. Their eyes were solid black and their mouths were too wide, filled with too many teeth. The first battle took place outside London. British forces had positioned tanks and artillery in what they thought were defensive positions. The Valthyr walked through the bombardment like it was rain. Their biomechanical warriors moved with impossible speed, covering ground in leaping bounds that defied gravity. When the human weapons hit them, the aliens simply regenerated. Bullets passed through their bodies like water. Artillery shells knocked them down, but they stood up seconds later, their wounds sealing themselves with wet, organic sounds. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, every human weapon was silent. The Valthyr had not killed the soldiers. Instead, they had done something worse. The human fighters stood perfectly still, their eyes now the same solid black as their captors. They had become something else, something that followed orders without question. Similar scenes played out across the globe. Military bases fell within hours. Nuclear weapons were launched from 3 different countries, but they never reached their targets. The Valthyr ships absorbed the missiles somehow, adding their energy to the purple glow that pulsed through their hulls. By the end of the first day, every major government had surrendered or ceased to exist. The United Nations building in New York became the Valthyr Command Center. Their leader, who called himself Takmor the Render, addressed the world from the same podium where human diplomats had once spoken of peace. Thakmor was larger than the other aliens, his armor more elaborate. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that seemed to press down on everyone who heard it. "Humans are now subjects of the Valthyr Empire," he announced. "You will work, you will obey, you will serve our expansion to other worlds. Those who resist will be changed. Those who serve will live." The processing centers began operation immediately. Humans were rounded up and sorted according to their skills. Scientists, engineers, and doctors were kept for their knowledge. Laborers were assigned to construction projects. Everyone else was held in massive camps while the aliens decided their fate. But as the Valthyr spread across Earth, they began to notice something strange. Hidden in remote locations around the planet were structures that did not match human architecture. Massive doors built into mountainsides, sealed chambers buried deep underground, facilities that seemed designed to contain something rather than protect something. The doors were enormous, made of materials the Valthyr did not recognize. Each one bore warning signs in multiple human languages. The messages were clear. Authorized personnel only. Biological hazard. Do not enter without proper containment protocols. Most disturbing of all, the doors were locked from the outside. Commander Zelkhan, one of Thakmor's chief scientists, reported his findings from a facility discovered in the Swiss Alps. "The barriers are not defensive, my lord," he said, his mechanical voice carrying an unusual note of uncertainty. "They are designed to prevent escape from within. The energy readings suggest massive life forms behind the sealed areas, and they appear to be aware of our presence." Thakmor studied the data on his viewing screen. His black eyes reflected the purple glow of the alien technology as he processed this information. "What manner of creatures would require such containment?" he asked. "Unknown, my lord. But the power requirements for these facilities are enormous. The humans have been feeding massive amounts of energy into these sites for decades. Whatever is behind these doors has been consuming power continuously." The render leaned back in his command throne, his two long fingers drumming against the armrest. In his conquest of 17 worlds, he had never encountered anything like this. Most species hid their weapons or their treasures. Humans had hidden their prisoners. "Continue monitoring these sites," he ordered. "But do not attempt to breach them yet. I want to understand what the humans were so afraid of that they built prisons instead of weapons." As the first week of occupation ended, more of the sealed facilities were discovered. They existed on every continent, hidden in deserts, buried under cities, sunk into ocean floors. Each one was a massive undertaking that must have required decades to construct and enormous resources to maintain. The humans who had been questioned about these facilities either claimed ignorance or refused to speak at all. Even under the Valthyr mind probes, they maintained their silence, as if they were more afraid of what was behind those doors than they were of their alien captors. In the resistance camps that had begun forming in the ruins of human civilization, former government officials whispered about things called Foundation protocols and containment procedures. They spoke of a shadow war that had been fought in secret for generations, a war against enemies that most humans never knew existed. Dr. Kim Tae-ho, now imprisoned in a Valthyr research facility, stared at the reports of the sealed doors and felt a cold fear settle in his stomach. He had clearance for some classified projects, enough to know that humanity's greatest achievements were not in space exploration or medical research. They were in keeping certain things locked away. As Thakmor consolidated his control over Earth, he could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. The conquest had been too easy. Humans were supposed to be a warrior species, according to the data his scouts had gathered. They fought constant wars among themselves and had developed impressive weapons for their level of technology. Yet when faced with true superior force, they had folded almost immediately. It was as if they were distracted by something else, something that required most of their attention and resources. The answer lay behind those sealed doors, waiting in the darkness. And despite every instinct telling him to leave them alone, Thakmor knew he would eventually have to look inside. The invasion was complete, but the real discovery was just beginning. Commander Yoon Minji crouched in the darkness of the abandoned subway tunnel, listening to the alien patrol pass overhead. The sound of their footsteps was wrong, like metal scraping against concrete mixed with something wet and organic. She waited until the noise faded before signaling to her team that it was safe to move. 3 weeks had passed since the invasion began. 3 weeks since the world had ended, and something else had taken its place. Yoon had been a major in the Korean Defense Forces before the Velther arrived. Now she was the leader of one of the few human resistance cells still operating in the ruins of Busan. Her team was small but skilled. Park Jin-woo had been a communications specialist before the aliens jammed all human technology. Lee Dong-sik was a government archivist who had somehow avoided capture when the processing centers opened. Kim Yura had worked as a translator for international organizations. Together, they had learned to survive in the spaces between the alien occupation. "The energy readings are getting stronger," whispered Park, adjusting the modified scanner they had built from salvaged electronics. "Whatever's behind those doors, the aliens are making it angry." Lee nodded grimly. He had been carrying a burden of knowledge since the invasion began, secrets that his government clearance had revealed but that he had never been allowed to discuss. Now, with the world conquered, those secrets seemed like the only weapons they had left. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "About those sealed facilities the aliens keep finding, about what the government was really doing with all that black budget money." Yoon looked at him sharply. In the dim light of their emergency lanterns, his face looked haggard and much older than his 43 years. "We knew," Lee continued. "The government knew we were not alone in the universe. But not because of aliens like these Velthyr. We knew because Earth itself was inhabited by things that should not exist." Kim frowned. "What kind of things?" "Things that broke the rules of reality. Creatures that existed outside normal physics. Entities that could change the laws of nature, just by being near them. We called them anomalies, but that was just a polite word for nightmares that refused to stay in dreams. Above them, the sound of Velthyr vehicles rumbled through the streets. The aliens were expanding their search patterns, looking for more of the hidden facilities that dotted the planet. Each discovery seemed to make them more agitated. "The Foundation was established in 1947, Lee explained. "Officially, it did not exist. Unofficially, it was the most important organization on Earth. Their job was simple: find the anomalies, contain them, and make sure normal people never learned they existed." Park looked skeptical. "You are saying there were monster hunters working in secret for 70 years? "Not hunters. Guards. Most of these things could not be killed, at least not in any way that mattered. Some of them were immortal. Others existed in multiple dimensions at once. A few could rewrite history by thinking about it. The Foundation did not fight them. They built prisons and learned how to keep the prisoners happy." Yoon had been monitoring alien communications during their conversation. The Velthyr used a form of radio that human equipment could barely detect, but they had managed to build receivers that could pick up fragments of their transmissions. "The aliens are scared," she reported. "I am hearing words like containment breach and reality distortion in their messages. They are also requesting more scientists and archaeologists from their homeworld. They are trying to understand what they found," said Lee. "But they are approaching it all wrong. The Foundation spent decades learning that some knowledge was too dangerous to seek. The aliens think they can study these entities like specimens in a laboratory." Kim had been quiet during the discussion, but now she spoke up. "I worked with some international research projects before the invasion. Strange. Projects with funding that came from nowhere and results that were immediately classified. We were studying locations where the laws of physics seemed to work differently. Containment sites," Lee confirmed. "Places where the anomalies were held. The Foundation built facilities all over the world, each one designed to hold specific types of entities. Some needed to be kept in complete darkness. Others had to be fed human memories to stay calm. A few required constant human interaction to prevent them from forgetting that reality existed. The implications were staggering. While humanity had been concerned with wars, climate change, and space exploration, a secret organization had been playing warden to creatures that could end civilization with a thought. "How many sites are there?" asked Yoon. "Hundreds. maybe thousands. The Foundation was very good at hiding things. Most government officials knew nothing about it. Even presidents and prime ministers only got briefings about the most dangerous cases. Above ground, another Velthir patrol passed by. This one was moving faster than usual, and their communications chatter sounded urgent. Yoon tuned her receiver to their frequency and listened. "They found another door," she translated. "This one in the Sahara Desert. The energy readings are off their scales, and they are detecting movement behind the barrier." Lee went pale. Site 23, that was one of the high-security locations. Level 5 containment protocol. What does that mean? It means whatever is behind that door required a facility that could survive a nuclear war and still keep the entity contained. It also means the entity inside could probably cause a nuclear war if it ever got out. The Velthir had been systematic in their investigation of Earth's hidden facilities. They deployed teams of scientists and engineers to each location, using advanced scanning equipment to analyze the barriers and the energy signatures behind them. What they discovered challenged everything they thought they knew about the species they had conquered. Commander Zelkon filed his latest report to Thakmor from a facility built into the Rocky Mountains. The door here was massive, a circular portal 50 meters across, sealed with materials that absorbed all forms of energy directed at them. "The containment systems are still active, my lord," he reported. "Human power grids continue to feed enormous amounts of electricity to these sites. The barriers are not just physical. They incorporate quantum field generators, reality anchors, and psionic dampeners." "Psionic dampeners?" Thakmor's voice carried a note of surprise. "The humans developed psychic technology?" "It appears so, my lord, but not for offense. These systems are designed to prevent mental influence from escaping the containment areas. Whatever is behind these doors can affect minds across great distances." The render studied the data streaming from dozens of sites around the planet. Each facility told the same story. Humanity had not been a primitive species stumbling toward space travel. They had been cosmic prison guards using technology that in some ways surpassed even Velthir achievements. "Have you attempted communication with any of the contained entities?" he asked. "Negative, my lord. The human containment protocols specifically forbid any form of contact. However, we have detected what appear to be attempts at communication from several sites. The entities are aware of our presence and seem to be trying to establish contact with us." This was the most disturbing development yet. If the creatures behind the doors were intelligent and aware, why had humans been so determined to keep them isolated? Most species would attempt to communicate with powerful entities, seeking to learn from them or ally with them. Back in the subway tunnels, Lee was explaining the Foundation's classification system to the resistance cell. They ranked anomalies by danger level. Safe meant contained and understood. Euclid meant contained but unpredictable. Cater meant barely contained and extremely dangerous. "What about the things that could not be contained at all?" asked Kim. Lee was quiet for a long moment. "Those were called Apollyon class, world enders. The Foundation's job was to make sure no Apollyon entities ever manifested on Earth, because if one did, there would be no containing it." "And you think the aliens might accidentally release something like that?" "I think the aliens do not understand what they are dealing with. They see advanced technology and assume it was built to hide weapons or treasures. They cannot conceive of a species that would build such elaborate prisons just to protect other life in the universe." Yoon had been monitoring more Velthir communications while they talked. The aliens were becoming increasingly agitated as they discovered more containment sites. Their scientific teams were reporting impossible readings. Creatures that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, entities that communicated by altering the flow of time, and things that seemed to be made of living mathematics. "They are planning to open one of the doors," she announced. "Tomorrow morning local time. They have selected a facility they think contains the least dangerous entity." Lee grabbed her arm. "Which site?" Yoon checked her notes. "They called it Site 19. Location coordinates put it in the Himalayas." Lee closed his eyes and seemed to age, another 10 years in the span of a few seconds. "Site 19 housed SCP-096. We called it the Shy Guy." "What does it do?" If you look at its face, it will hunt you down and kill you. No matter where you go, no matter how you try to hide, it will find you. It can tear through steel with its bare hands, and it never stops moving once it has been activated. That does not sound. Park Sun-ho had not slept in 3 days. The former Foundation researcher sat in his cell aboard the Valthyr command ship, watching through the small window as the alien fleet prepared for the breach of Site 19. He had tried everything to make them understand what they were about to unleash. But the aliens dismissed his warnings as lies meant to protect human secrets. Please, he had begged Commander Zelkan during his latest interrogation. You do not understand what you are doing. That facility was built to contain something that should never be released. The protocols exist for a reason. The alien commander had tilted his elongated head in what might have been amusement. Human fear tactics will not work on us. We have conquered 17 worlds. We have seen the weapons and horrors that species create. Whatever primitive terror you have locked away will be no match for Valthyr technology. Now, as Sun-ho watched, the massive drilling equipment being positioned over Site 19, he could only pray that the containment systems would hold long enough for someone to restore the barriers. But he knew the truth about SCP-096. Once it was awakened, stopping it would require more than just closing a door. At Site 19, built into a remote valley in the Himalayas, Thakmor the Render personally oversaw the breach operation. The facility was impressive even by Valthyr standards. The door was a perfect circle carved from a single piece of an unknown metal, surrounded by rings of symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. Energy readings are fluctuating, my lord, reported technical specialist Vorthak. The entity inside appears to be responding to our presence. Heart rate and brain activity are increasing. It knows we are here, Thakmor mused. Interesting. Begin the cutting sequence. The Valthyr had brought their most advanced equipment for the operation, so plasma cutters that could slice through starship hulls, quantum disruptors that could break molecular bonds, and energy weapons powerful enough to level mountains. Surely nothing the primitive humans had locked away could withstand such firepower. Theon first cut sent sparks flying across the mountainside. The metal of the door was unlike anything in Valthyr databases, but it yielded slowly to their tools. As the breach widened, strange sounds began to emerge from within. Scraping noises, like fingernails on metal. Low moaning that seemed to come from something in great distress. Atmospheric readings from inside the chamber, reported another technician. Temperature is significantly lower than external environment. Humidity is near zero. No detectable toxins or biological hazards. Visual contact in 30 seconds, announced the lead cutter operator. That was when Park Sun-ho began screaming warnings over the communication channel. The Valthyr had forced him to monitor the operation, hoping his reactions would reveal human deceptions. Instead, his terror was becoming more genuine by the second. Do not look at it, he shouted into his microphone. When the door opens, do not look directly at the entity. Close your eyes, turn away, do not let it see that you have seen its face. Silence the human, ordered Thakmor. But something in Sun-ho's voice made him pause. The man was not trying to deceive them. He was genuinely terrified. Not for himself, but for the aliens about to breach the containment. The door fell inward with a thunderous crash that echoed through the mountains. Emergency lights inside the chamber flickered on, revealing a sterile, white room about 20 meters square. In the center sat a pale humanoid figure. At first glance it looked almost harmless. Thin and malnourished, with overly long limbs and fingers. Its skin was chalk white and seemed to have never seen sunlight. It sat perfectly still, facing away from the breach, its head hanging down as if it were sleeping or dead. Scans indicate the entity is alive, reported Vorthak. Minimal movement but definite life signs. It appears to be in some form of dormant state. 3 Valthyr soldiers entered the chamber, their weapons ready. The entity did not react to their presence. They moved closer, their helmet cameras transmitting everything back to the command ship where dozens of alien scientists watched the feeds. Turn it around, ordered Thakmor. I want to see its face. That was the moment Park Sun-ho broke free from his restraints and threw himself at the communication console. No, he screamed. Do not look at its face. Kill the video feeds. Shut down the cameras. Please, you have to listen to me. But it was too late. One of the soldiers had reached out and grabbed the entity's shoulder, turning it to face the camera. For a brief moment, SCP-096's face filled the screens throughout the Valthyr fleet. It had been human once, perhaps, but whatever it had become was a mockery of human features. Its face was elongated and distorted, with a jaw that hung open, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. But it was the eyes that were truly terrible. Black holes in its skull that seemed to look directly at everyone who viewed them, no matter how many screens or cameras separated the observer from the source. The moment its face appeared on the monitors, SCP-096 began to scream. The sound was unlike anything the Valthyr had ever heard. It was not just loud, it was wrong in a fundamental way that made their audio equipment overload and their enhanced hearing organs bleed. The scream contained harmonics that should not exist, frequencies that caused reality itself to vibrate, in sympathy. But worse than the sound was what happened next. The entity stood up. It moved with jerky, unnatural motions like a marionette controlled by a drunk puppeteer. But despite its awkward appearance, it was fast, impossibly fast. It crossed the 20-meter chamber in less than a second and struck the first Valthyr soldier with enough force to send the alien flying through the reinforced wall behind him. "Open fire," commanded the squad leader, but SCP-096 was already moving. It tore through the remaining soldiers like they were made of paper, its claws cutting through their advanced armor as if it were cloth. Purple alien blood splattered the white walls of the containment chamber as screams echoed through the communication channels. "What is happening down there?" demanded Thakmor, but his technical staff could only stare at their instruments in shock. "The entity's speed is registering at over 200 kilometers per hour, my lord," stammered Vorthak. "Strength readings are off our scales. It appears to be tearing through solid rock to reach the surface." Park Sun-ho had collapsed at his console, tears streaming down his face. "You looked at it," he whispered. "Everyone who saw its face on the monitors, everyone who watched the feed. It knows you exist now. It will come for all of you." As if responding to his words, SCP-096's screaming changed pitch. The sound was no longer just rage and pain. There was purpose in it now. Hunger. The entity had detected its viewers, and it had begun to hunt. The creature burst from the underground facility like a missile, sending chunks of rock and twisted metal flying in all directions. The Valthyr had built their command post 2 kilometers away, thinking themselves safe from whatever was contained within. They learned how wrong they were when SCP-096 covered the distance in under 30 seconds. The first ship it reached was a troop transport carrying 50 soldiers. The entity tore through the hull with its bare hands, the screaming never stopping as it searched for faces it had seen through the camera feed. The aliens inside tried to fight, but their weapons might as well have been toys. SCP-096 moved through them like a force of nature, leaving only death in its wake. "All units, focus fire on the entity," ordered Thakmor. But the command was useless. Every shot that hit SCP-096 only seemed to make it angrier. Plasma bolts that could melt steel left only small burns on its pale skin. Energy weapons that could destroy buildings barely slowed it down. Worse, the entity seemed to know exactly where to find its targets. It ignored soldiers who had not seen its face, moving past them without violence to reach those who had viewed the camera feeds. Its hunting pattern was precise and methodical, as if it carried a list of everyone who owed it death. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, 12 Valthyr ships lay in ruins across the mountainside. The entity stood among the wreckage, covered in purple blood, its black eyes scanning the horizon for more targets. Then it began to run, not toward the remaining ships, but in a different direction entirely. Toward the command vessel in orbit, where more aliens had seen its face through the transmitted feeds. "How is it going to reach us?" asked Vorthak, his voice shaking. "We are in space. It cannot possibly..." His words were cut off as long-range sensors detected an object launching itself from the planet's surface. SCP-096 had found a way to jump, using the wreckage of destroyed ships as a springboard to reach escape velocity. Its screaming could still be heard over the radio channels as it hurtled through space toward them. Park Sun-ho watched the tactical display showing the creature's approach and felt a terrible certainty settle in his chest. This was only the beginning. Site-19 had been one of the easier containment cases, chosen because the entity inside was considered relatively predictable. If the Vilthier learned nothing from this disaster, they would breach other sites. And behind some of those doors were things that made SCP-096 look like a minor inconvenience. The invasion was over, but the real nightmare had just begun. And somewhere in facilities around the world, other entities were stirring in their prisons, awakened by the SU. Dr. Kim Tae-ho watched the chaos unfold from his cell in the Vilthier research facility. 3 days had passed since the breach at Site-19, and the alien fleet was in complete disorder. Ships drifted through space with their crews dead or missing. Communication channels carried nothing but screaming or silence. The entity they had released was still hunting, moving from vessel to vessel with impossible determination. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was what the breach had triggered across Earth. "The containment network is failing," reported Lee So-young from her hiding place in the ruins of Geneva. The former Foundation containment specialist had been monitoring the global situation using salvaged equipment. Site-19 was connected to the quantum stabilization grid. When it went down, it sent cascade failures to facilities worldwide. Commander Yoon Min-ji received the report through their encrypted communication channel. Her resistance cell had grown larger as more Foundation personnel emerged from hiding, drawn together by the desperate need to prevent total containment collapse. "How many sites are affected?" she asked. 17 facilities are showing critical instability," Lee replied. "The entities inside are responding to the breach. They know something has changed and they are testing their prisons with renewed strength." In orbit above Earth, what remained of the Vilthier command structure was trying to understand what they had unleashed. Thakmor the Render had survived the attack on his command ship, but barely. Half his fleet was gone, destroyed by a single entity that defied every law of physics they knew. "Status report," he demanded from his new flagship, his voice hoarse, from breathing recycled air contaminated with his own soldiers' blood. Commander Zelkan consulted his instruments with shaking hands. "The entity designated SCP-096 has ceased its active hunting pattern, my lord. It appears to have returned to Earth's surface and resumed a dormant state." "What about the other facilities?" "We are detecting massive energy fluctuations at sites around the globe. The quantum field generators that the humans used for containment are overloading. Several barriers are showing structural stress fractures." Thakmor stared at the tactical display showing Earth below them. What had seemed like a simple conquest had become a nightmare beyond comprehension. The humans had not been hiding weapons or treasures behind those doors. They had been containing forces that could destroy civilizations. "My lord," reported another technician, "we are receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It appears to be from one of the human prisoners." Dr. Kim's face appeared on the main screen, his expression grave but determined. Behind him, other humans could be seen working frantically with alien equipment they had somehow learned to operate. "I am Dr. Kim Tae-ho of the Global Defense Initiative," he began. "I need to speak with your commander immediately. What you have done threatens not just Earth, but potentially your entire species." Thakmor leaned forward in his command throne. "You are in no position to make demands, human." "I am not making demands. I am offering to help you understand what you have stumbled into before it destroys us all." Kim's voice carried a weight of knowledge that made even the alien leader pause. "The entity you released was one of the simpler containment cases. If the cascade failures continue, you will face things that make SCP-096 look like a harmless pet." "Explain." Kim activated a holographic display that showed Earth's surface dotted with hundreds of red warning indicators. For over 70 years, humanity has been containing anomalous entities that exist outside normal reality. Some alter the laws of physics, Others consume concepts instead of matter. A few exist as living ideas that can rewrite history by thinking about it. The alien commander studied the display with growing unease. These creatures, they are all prisoners? Not prisoners. Threats to existence itself that we learn to manage. The Foundation's job was not to destroy these entities, it was to keep them from destroying everything else. On Earth's surface, the effects of the containment failures were becoming visible. In the Amazon rainforest, Site-23 began emitting a strange purple glow as something inside pressed against barriers that had held for decades. The local reality became unstable, with trees growing backwards into seeds and rivers flowing uphill. Lee So-young monitored the readings from her hidden bunker in Switzerland. Site-23 is showing critical containment breach probability within 6 hours, she reported to the Resistance Network. If SCP-173 escapes, it will begin converting all matter in a 50-kilometer radius into its own material. What does that mean? Asked Park Jinwoo from his position in the Seoul Underground. It means everything it touches becomes part of it. Rocks, trees, people, buildings, all transformed into concrete and rebar that moves and thinks and hunts. The conversion spreads exponentially until entire continents become extensions of a single massive entity. Commander Yoon coordinated the resistance response from her mobile command post. Former Foundation personnel were emerging from hiding around the world, each carrying pieces of knowledge about the containment systems. Together, they were trying to restore power to critical facilities before the barriers failed completely. We need to reach Site 87 in Nevada, reported Dr. Park Hae-sung, a former Foundation researcher who had spent 20 years studying reality-altering entities. The quantum anchor there is the keystone for the Western Hemisphere containment grid. If it fails, we lose everything from Alaska to Argentina. But getting to Site 87 meant crossing territory now controlled by confused and increasingly desperate Feldherr forces. The aliens were discovering that their advanced technology was useless against entities that could ignore the laws of physics. In the Pacific Ocean, something was stirring in the deep containment facility built into the Mariana Trench. Site 91 had been constructed to hold entities that existed partially in underwater dimensions. The breach at Site 19 had sent shockwaves through the quantum substrate that connected all containment facilities, and now the thing in the deep was waking up. Sonar readings from the few remaining human submarines detected movement at crushing depths. Something enormous was rising from the ocean floor, its form defying three-dimensional geometry. As it ascended, the water around it began to change, taking on properties that water should not have. Captain Han Min-jae, commanding one of the last operational Korean naval vessels, watched his instruments with growing horror. The water temperature is dropping rapidly, he reported to anyone still listening. But it is not freezing. It is becoming something else entirely. The entity from Site 91 breached the surface near Hawaii, its form visible only as a distortion in space that hurt to look at directly. Where it touched the ocean, the water became a crystalline substance that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Fish caught in the transformation did not die. They became mathematical equations that swam through liquid geometry. Thakmore watched the reports streaming in from around the planet and felt something he had never experienced in his centuries of conquest: absolute terror. His species had developed faster than light travel, energy weapons that could crack planets and biotechnology that could reshape life itself. But none of it mattered against entities that operated outside the fundamental constants of reality. How did your species contain such things? He asked Dr. Kim during their ongoing communication. Carefully, expensively, and with the knowledge that failure meant the end of everything we cared about. Kim's expression was grim as he watched status reports from facilities around the world. The Foundation developed containment procedures through trial and catastrophic error. Every protocol was written in blood, usually the blood of researchers, who died learning what not to do. And now we have undone 70 years of your work in a single day. Not just our work, the work of everyone who ever lived. These entities were contained not just to protect humanity, but to protect reality itself. Some of them predate the formation of galaxies. Others exist in the spaces between thoughts. All of them are threats to the continued existence of ordered reality. Site 42 in Antarctica began showing critical readings as something inside started, affecting local spacetime. The facility had been built to contain an entity that existed as living temporal distortion. Now, as its barriers weakened, time itself began to flow backwards in an expanding circle around the containment site. Researchers, who had died in the initial Velthir invasion, suddenly appeared alive again, walking backwards through their last moments. Snow fell upward into clouds that had not yet formed. The alien garrison stationed near the facility watched in confusion as their own actions began to reverse, their memories rewinding as causality collapsed. Dr. Kim continued his desperate briefing. To the Velthir command, the entities are connected through quantum entanglement across dimensional barriers. When one containment fails, it sends resonance waves to all the others. The more breaches we have, the faster the remaining containments will collapse. How do we stop it? You cannot. Your technology is not designed to interact with these forces. Only the Foundation's equipment can restore containment, and most of our facilities are in ruins thanks to your invasion. Thakmor found himself in an impossible position. His species had conquered Earth in mere days, but in doing so they had broken the sea. The alliance between humans and Velthir began in the ruins of what had once been Geneva. Dr. Kim Tae-ho stood beside Thakmor the Render in the emergency command center they had established, watching as containment failures spread across the globe like a virus. The cosmic horror they faced had made their species' differences seem trivial. Site 87 is completely offline, reported Lee So-young from her monitoring station. The quantum anchor in Nevada has been destroyed. We are losing the entire western grid. Commander Yoon Minji coordinated rescue teams trying to reach critical facilities. Her resistance fighters now worked alongside Velthir soldiers. Both sides, united by the knowledge that failure meant the end of everything they knew. The entity from Site 173 has begun its conversion process, she announced grimly. South America is reporting massive geometric transformations. Entire cities are becoming part of its collective consciousness. Park Ji-hoon, the former Foundation director who had emerged from hiding when the crisis began, explained the situation to the mixed human-alien command staff. His weathered face showed the weight of decades spent guarding cosmic secrets. The Foundation was established in 1947, but our work began much earlier, he said. Ancient human civilizations encountered these entities throughout history. The pyramids, Stonehenge, Easter Island. All of them were early containment attempts using primitive technology. Thakmor listened with growing comprehension and horror. Your species has been fighting this war for millennia. Not fighting, managing. These entities cannot be destroyed by conventional means. Most of them exist outside normal spacetime. Some are older than galaxies. Others are living concepts that predate matter itself. Humanity learned to coexist with them through careful containment and appeasement. The screens around the command center showed the true scope of the crisis. In Japan, Site 34 had failed completely, releasing an entity that existed as living shadow. Entire prefectures were disappearing into darkness that consumed light, matter, and memory. In Russia, something was emerging from the permafrost that made the ground itself come alive, turning the Siberian tundra into a vast organic network of thinking Earth. How many of these things are there? Asked Commander Zelkan, the Velthir scientist who had survived the initial breach. Thousands, replied Dr. Kim. The Foundation cataloged over 6,000 anomalous entities, locations, and phenomena. Most were contained or neutralized. But the dangerous ones, the ones that could end civilizations, we built the most secure facilities to hold them. And we destroyed those facilities in our ignorance. Not destroyed, damaged. The containment systems are failing because they require constant maintenance and power. Your invasion disrupted the support networks that kept them running. Park Sun-ho, the researcher who had tried to warn the aliens, worked frantically at a jury-rigged control station. I am reading massive energy buildup at Site 001, he announced. The Alpha facility is showing signs of imminent breach. The command center fell silent. Even the Velthir, who did not understand the full implications, could sense the terror that gripped the human personnel. What is Site 001? asked Thakmor Park. Jihoon closed his eyes. The gate. The original breach point where these entities first entered our reality. We built the Foundation's most secure facility around it to ensure it never opened again. And if it opens, then everything we have contained over the past 70 years becomes irrelevant. Site-001 contains the source. If that barrier fails, entities will pour through from dimensions where the laws of physics are merely suggestions. The race to prevent total containment collapse became a desperate fight against time itself. Valther fusion reactors were hastily connected to human quantum anchors using technology that should not have been compatible. Former enemies worked side by side, sharing knowledge and resources in a last attempt to hold back cosmic chaos. Dr. Han Mikyung, a quantum physicist who had designed many of the containment systems, coordinated the power redistribution from her station in Seoul. "We are channeling energy from 30 Valther ships into the primary grid," she reported. "It should be enough to restore basic containment to critical sites." But as they worked to restore the barriers, the true nature of humanity's burden became clear. The entities were not random monsters or ancient weapons. They were refugees, exiles, and prisoners from realities where existence followed different rules. Earth had become their prison because it existed at a crossroads of dimensions, a place where multiple realities touched. "We were never the dominant species on this planet," Park Jihoon explained to the assembled command staff. "We were the janitors, the cleaners. Our job was to maintain the barriers that kept reality stable." "Why us?" asked Thakmor. "Why did humanity take on this responsibility?" "Because we were expendable. The entities that gave us this task saw humans as a young species with potential but no great achievements to lose. If we failed, reality would collapse, but the universe would eventually rebuild itself. Other species, older and more advanced, would have been too great a loss." The revelation struck the Valther commander like a physical blow. His species had spent centuries conquering primitive worlds, never realizing that one of those worlds was performing a service that kept the universe stable. "The doors we found," he said slowly. "They were not hiding treasures or weapons. They were maintaining cosmic quarantine. Every facility, every containment site, every sealed door was part of a vast machine designed to keep reality from unraveling. And we broke it." Site-001 began showing critical readings as something vast and terrible pressed against barriers that had held for over a century. The quantum locks were failing one by one, each collapse sending shock waves through the fabric of space-time itself. "Containment. Breach imminent," announced Park Sun-ho. "Estimated time to total failure 6 hours. Can we restore it?" asked Commander Yoon. "Not with current power levels. We would need the energy output of a star to rebuild the primary barrier." Thakmor studied the readings and made a decision that would define both species' future. "Prepare my fleet for maximum power transfer. All reactors, all energy reserves. Channel everything into the containment grid." "My lord, that will leave us defenseless. Our ships will be powerless. Better powerless than non-existent." The next 4 hours were the longest in either species' history. Valther technology pushed beyond its limits, fed power into containment systems that humanity had built through decades of trial and error. Ancient barriers designed to hold cosmic nightmares drew energy from fusion reactors that could power entire planets. Slowly, impossibly, the containment grid stabilized. One by one, the failing sites came back online. The entities that had begun to escape were gradually forced back into their prisons, reality reasserting itself through careful application of technology that neither species fully understood. But the cost was enormous. The Valther fleet was left crippled, their ships barely able to maintain life support. Many of the containment facilities had been permanently damaged and would require decades to rebuild properly. As the immediate crisis passed, Thakmor found himself looking at Earth with new understanding. What he had seen as a conquest target was actually the keystone that held reality together. Humanity had not been weak, they had been guardians. "We will withdraw from Earth," he announced to his surviving fleet commanders. "This world and its people are to be protected, not conquered." "My lord?" Mark this system as forbidden. Any Velthir who approaches Earth without authorization will be considered a threat to cosmic stability. Dr. Kim joined the alien commander. As they watched the containment status board slowly shift from red to amber to green, the immediate danger was over, but both species now understood the true nature of their situation. "This cannot happen again," Kim said quietly. "The next breach might be the last one. Reality itself might not survive another cascade failure." "We will help you rebuild," Thakmor replied. "My species has technology that could strengthen your containment systems, energy sources that could power them for millennia. And in return, we ask only that you continue your vigil. The universe needs its guardians." As the Velthir fleet prepared to depart, leaving behind only a small contingent to assist with reconstruction, Park Ji-hoon addressed the mixed human-alien team that had saved reality itself. "The Foundation will continue its work," he announced. "But now we know we are not alone in the darkness. When the next crisis comes, and it will come, we will face it together." The invasion was over. The real alliance had just begun. And somewhere, in the deep places where cosmic horrors waited behind locked doors, ancient entities settled back into their prisons, knowing that their jailers had learned the true cost of vigilance. Earth remained what it had always been, a fortress built to contain nightmares, staffed by a species that had chosen to stand guard over the dreams of the universe. The doors were locked once again. The vigil continued, and in the vast darkness between realities, things that should not exist waited patiently for their next chance at freedom, knowing that somewhere above them, humans and aliens worked together to ensure that chance would never come.